is Maisie, and I'm going to be your live educator today. And as I said, we're coming live from the Central Caribbean Marine Institute here on Little Cayman. Now, just like much of the world, the Cayman Islands is in lockdown. And I do just want to assure everyone before we get started that we are all following the government protocols in place. The two people involved in this broadcast live at the research station, and we are not being asked to come into work unnecessarily. So everyone watching, make sure that you're following your government's protocols about the lockdown protocols that you follow. Now, I just want to say a huge thank you to everyone for tuning in all over the world. Now, remember, this is an interactive broadcast, so you can ask questions, which I will answer later on in this broadcast, and just type those questions in just in that chat, which is to the right of the video feed on YouTube, and I will try and answer as many as I can later on. Also, we would love to know how you are tuning in different locations in the world. So if you're tuning in, please do a shout out in the chat box now where you're viewing from, because we want to know how many different countries tuning in to beautiful little Cayman that we have here. Now, let's get started with today's. We're going to be learning all about coral outplanting, and we're going to be diving underwater in just a bit. I'm going to learn how to do that. But before that, what we're going to do is we're going to do a really quick recap about what we've actually learned in the past 2 lessons, because this is the last part of a 3-part series that we have been doing. So what have we learned already? Well, in our first lesson, we learned that a coral is made up of lots and lots of tiny animals called coral polyps, which are kind of like upside down jellyfish, and they have got tentacles they have got sting cell tentacles which allow them to catch food from the water. So this is how they get some of food, but most of their food comes from the algae that lives inside. Algae is called zooxanthellae, and it's like most plants, it undertakes photosynthesis. That's what is the sun's energy to convert carbon dioxide into oxygen, and it puts at time, and this is most of their food. So really, really cool. Now, there are lots and lots of different types of coral, and we actually grow one type of coral in our coral nursery, and this is called standard coral, which is the one that we have right here. Now, this stag coral has been under lots and lots of threats in the past, such as lots of diseases that have actually come through. Now, these diseases are just a number of the different threats that different corals on the reef actually face. So we spoke last week about some of the key threats that they're actually facing. So the key threats that corals are facing in particular, one that actually all environments are facing, is that there is lots and lots of global warming, which has actually resulted in there being really, really hot waters in the ocean, which can lead to coral bleaching. So that's when the zooxanthellae that we were speaking about earlier actually leaves the coral, and this causes it to become white, and it means it doesn't have very much food anymore. This means that sometimes it can die. Another reason that corals are under threat is because of acidification. When the ocean, as the name suggests, is becoming acidic, and this actually causes the corals to break down and not be able to grow as easily, because they're made out of this calcium carbonate right here, which actually dissolves in acids. So that can be really challenging for them. Some of the other threats that we're facing as well include pollution and coastal development, which can cause damage to these corals. Also, overfishing can be a huge issue as well, because that means that some of the key herbivores, that's creatures that eat lots of plants, they're actually not there anymore. And this means that sometimes algae can grow over the top of the coral, which can actually cause it to have reduced growth rates and means that it's not very healthy anymore. And unfortunately, it can die. Now, all of these above things actually make corals more susceptible to diseases, and it means they're not as healthy. Now, you guys at home can try and combat this by trying to, for example, reduce down your carbon emissions. So, for example, you can start walking to the shops rather than driving your car, making sure you're turning off the light when you're leaving your room. You could also, for example, switch to a more plant-based diet. And some other ways that you can help is by supporting fantastic environmental organisations. There's lots of them here in the Cayman Islands and all over the world that you can help support. And number one, most important, is that you can make sure that you are telling all of your friends and families about some of the threats that are facing coral reefs. And you can try and educate them all about this and how you can all make a difference. And anyone can do any of the above things that I listed. You don't be living directly in a coral reef in order to be able to help them. However, luckily for us research station, we are directly next to the ocean. So obviously with beautiful flat calm day here today, and actually our coral nursery, which we're going to be speaking about, is just behind right there. So what we're trying to do, because we're so close to the corals and we can help them as much as we can, we're trying to grow corals in our corals that we can put them back to the reef. Now, in a coral nursery, a lot of the threats that we spoke about are actually removed, and the corals actually grow a lot faster than they would do in the wild. So this staghorn coral, which is the one that we are growing, this grows about 10 to 20 centimeters a year in the wild, but in our coral nursery, it's growing about 7 times faster, which is really cool. So we're growing all of these corals in our coral nursery. We've learned about how we measure our coral, keep our frames clean. But what we're going to learn about today is actually outplanting these corals, which is where we take a coral from the coral nursery and we put it back into its natural environment. But if corals are facing so many threats, why do we want to remove them from the nice, safe environment that we're growing them in and then go and put them out onto the reef where potentially they get damaged, lots of disease, there's lots of predators? And this is a question we get asked lots here at CCMI. It's like, why not just keep them in the coral reef? Surely they're nice and safe there and they're in danger else. Well, the reason why we really want to put our corals back onto the reef is because they are something called ecosystem engineers. Now, ecosystem engineers are any organism that can create, significantly modify, maintain, or destroy a habitat. So in the case of corals, they are creating an environment. So if we think about a terrestrial example, think for example about trees inside of a forest. If there were no tree forest, and it's the exact same corals, because they are extracting this calcium carbonate from the water. We spoke about that in our first lesson, which is super, the fact that they can just extract this from the water and actually build their own skeletons. But these hard corals, they're building their skeletons, and this is forming a structure which is on the reef. And this structure actually provides habitats for lots and lots of other creatures to be able to live there. Let's think about, sorry, 1 second. We're having difficulties. I don't know whether or not you're all able to hear me. Are we all good? Much better. So let's think about a terrestrial example that we have, or actually a human example, which may make it a little bit easier. So let's think about two areas that are the same size. These are going to be pretty large areas. We have one area that is a city, and we have another area which is a desert. Now, as a human, where can more of us live? I definitely think that more people can live inside of this city area compared to the area, because where are there more homes for us all to be able to survive? Definitely in the city. I don't know about you guys, but I don't think I could last very long inside of a desert. So the same things that corals are doing. Corals are essentially underwater cities. So these coral reefs, although they cover less than 1% of the ocean, they actually house 25% of all marine life. That is a huge, huge amount of fish and other creatures that are living inside of them. And that's simply because they are providing the structures and the different houses and habitats for all the different creatures to be able to live in it. Now, because they are forming this structure and there's lots of different creatures living there, essentially allowing lots of different food chains in order to be able to develop. Now, for those of you that don't know, a food chain is a really simple example of how energy moves through. So, for example, at the bottom, the terrestrial example once again, we have grass, which is then eaten by an insect, and this insect is then eaten by birds, and this bird is then eaten by something else, for example. So that's showing how that energy is moving through that food chain. And because corals are providing all of this nice structure, it means there are lots and lots of creatures that are living there. So there's lots of different food you're actually finding in. And I know that you have an at-home activity sheet that you guys are supposed to be filling in, which actually has an example of building your own food chain. So you take a look at that at-home activity sheet. If you don't have a copy of it, don't worry. We're actually going to send through the link so that you can have a look at that in the chat box right now. But essentially, that is the more corals there are, and the healthier the coral reef is, the more structure it provides, and that means that there's more creatures. And so if there's more creatures and there's more food chains and there's lots of movement going on, then that means we're likely to have lots of the apex predators that are at the top of the food chain. So for example, a really healthy coral reef with lots of structure will have, for example, more barracudas. And this is just showing how healthy the environment is. So this is the key reason why we don't want to keep our corals just hanging in a coral nursery. We really want to make sure that we're actually putting them back onto the reef, which will allow this structure to kind of be formed, and it will allow habitats for lots of different creatures to be able to live there, and that it's a healthier coral reef. So what we're going to do now, guys, in just a moment, we are going to hand over to Katie, who's going to show how we do this. Now, make sure that you are sent whilst this video is playing, because I'm actually going to come back after this and we're going to do a question and answer session. So make sure you're typing in those questions and I will come right back after this video to get answering some of those. Okay, I'm going to hand you over to Katie. What is happening with this audio?
Why don't students come with me? Partners have access up a special area right next to this coral nursery, just so that you students can see what outplanting a coral is really like. So I'm just going to grab my bag of tools here, and we can get started. All right, so before we can outplant the coral, you students saw how we cleaned the corals, we measured them for total linear extension. We also want to make sure to get corals that look 100% healthy, and then we know what their genetic history or family is like. is they have a bead that's a different color. This coral has a black bead, this coral has a yellow bead, and this coral has a green bead. Each of these beads signifies a different family the coral came from. That's something that we want to make sure to record before we outplant. Now I've got 2 corals here that are ready for outplanting. Let's see. I believe it's 2 here. Our nursery as broken fragments, just kind of rolling on the ground, and where they came from. So we call them unknown genotypes, or they're from unknown family. So they have no bead associated with them. So what we're going to do is I'm going to use these wire cutters to curl as close as possible at the base, trying to leave as much of that monoid line behind. There we go. While our videographer Drew is getting things set up in the outplant area. Now, we are going to need some tools for this outplanting. So I'm going to make sure to take out our data sheet here, the same data sheet that you students use for your total linear extension. And then I'm going to take this big brush here. Now I do want to say, first things first, that this is a outplant site that was allowed, that we as CCMI are allowed to outplant to on the natural reef from a permit from the Department of Environment. So it may look like this is harmful to the reef, but overall this is for the benefit of the reef. So I'm going to around to make it free of any algae. This is that bad algae we were talking about that competes with the coral directly, and we just want to make sure the area we're outplanting is free algae or sponges or that coral to grow the structure. After we've done it really well, we're going to use a marine epoxy, like an unglue. It's 2 different colors, just barely. One is a little more gray and it's a little bit creamy or white colored. And I'm just going to mix those up really, really well into what's called a homogeneous mixture. Homogeneous means that you can't tell anymore. It all looks the same. Until to give off this kind of smoky look, then you know that the underwater glue is ready to use. It starts to get a little more easier to mix together as well. A little more melt. It's kind of like silly putty. I don't know if you guys actually still have silly putty. That was so now you can see it's smoking pretty good to the point where you probably can't even see my face anymore. And you only need a little amount, maybe the size of a piece of kiss. And I'm going to put it on the side of these nails. at the very, very base there. And I've got a bit of extra that I can keep on the side, just in case. And then we're going to take a zip tie, and we're going to zip tie this coral in place. So we squish well as best we can into that epoxy, and then wrap this zip tie. If we can get two, there we'll try. Actually, we may only need one for this one. There we go. And you got it all in place on that nail as quickly as you can. I want that coral to be able to move around, because what's going to happen is the coral tissue is going to grow that zip tie. So it's not the coral at all. The coral is going to think that this zip tie is now a part of its internal skeleton, and it's going to grow its tissue right over it as fast as maybe a week or two from now. Now this epoxy, you got to push up into those coral polyps on the bottom so that it gets deep inside the coral skeleton, all around the base. Because Samuel is going to think that this is part of its skeleton and grow over it fairly quickly. Alright, and the last step is you trim the more zipper is, the more algae is actually going to grow. There we go. Alright. So that coral is now out onto the reef, and we'll probably outgrow this zip tie and the nail in that epoxy on the bottom in maybe just a month or two. So not very long at all.
Welcome back, everyone. We are experiencing some technical difficulties, so I'm sorry if the video is not very well. Okay, we'll just a couple of minutes. We're just going to try. Do you want to put this on so we can try? Is it working? Okay, perfect. All right, we are experiencing technical difficulties. As you may have realized, audio does keep going in and out, and it was a little bit crackly on our video just there. We're really sorry about that. This is when you live on a tiny island in the middle of nowhere and the internet doesn't want to work for some reason. I really hope that you've been able to hear me as much as possible and the video didn't break up too much. If you are having any issues or you think you missed out on something, do just type a question in the chat box, and if, for example, the video broke up and you didn't quite hear what Katie was saying, then please do just type that question in and I will try and answer it as well as I possibly can. So in that video, Katie did really excellent demo. Obviously, take a hammer, put it into the substrate, you stick your coral in and then you zip tie it on. However, we do actually have another outplanting technique here, I have one of these methods right behind me here. So I'm going to try and pick this up and try not to knock a phone on the floor. So if we look right here, what we actually have is one of our coral domes. And what we're trying to do is by putting our corals on top of these domes, rather than just putting them straight onto the substrate, what we're actually kind of doing is making our own very mini nursery, because the corals are above the bottom and they're not, for example, touching the sand, which is underneath. Now, if you remember last week, how a lot of threats, or some of the threats that corals face, predators, for example, diseases can be transmitted all along that sandy bottom. So by having a dome like this, and for example, taking it and attaching it right here on it, it actually means that our not touching the bottom means that they're going to be under a little bit less stress. This is actually going to be a really, so what we use of corals, tie them all over kind of spider frame, and we put this down the reef and we see what happens, and these are doing really well. So the survival rate, and I've just got a question from Ron that's saying, what percentage of our outplanting coral actually survive? Well, with these domes that we have right here, we actually have an 100% rate in around 5 months. So that's really, really good. So there is a little bit of death later, but with the really, really good survival rate. However, with the outplants that Katie was doing, where you just put the hammer, you hammer a nail into the sand, then you zip tie the coral on, in the first 5 months of those ones, then we actually only have around a 37 to 41% survival rate. And that's not just us, that's actually for most places in the Caribbean. It's actually not that successful to use the first method, but this one is doing really, really well. And actually our research project with these domes is going to continue this year. So as soon as all of the restrictions have lifted and we're able to go back out in the field again and do our research, we're actually putting lots more of these out on the reef. Now, this all links to your act that you guys should have. I know for that earlier. Now, once again, last week, please don't judge my not in one of your. You have been tasked to own coral. I did this yesterday in my lunch break. You can see there's lots and lots of sellotape here. But what I've essentially done is I have taken lots and lots of little toothpicks. I have sellotaped them together and I have corals onto them. So it looks quite a lot like a coral frame that I have right behind me here. All the instructions in your at-home activity sheet. So if you want to go and make your own coral dome, then please do that and send in some pictures to us and we'll put them on media pages. Alright guys, if I could answer something on with our broadcast. So, do we have any questions that are coming through at all? Or would you like me all to a bit more about why our outplant is successful? Okay, so as I said, we are kind of using this method and we are also hammering into the substrate as well. Another way that we're putting our coral onto the reef is we are actually trying to grow on these little hockey pucks as well that are made out. I don't have a demonstration for you right now, but we kind of have concrete discs like this. We are growing our onto them, bring our corals onto these sticks. When we put them out, we actually don't have to kind of touch them and handle them as much. Instead, we can just drill a hole and drop this kind of concrete onto the reef, and that means they're a little bit more likely to survive. Because what we've got to remember is that when we're moving things around, especially we're taking corals from our coral nursery and putting them in different sites around the island, is that when you're doing that, under a lot of stress, and we want to try and reduce down that stress as much as possible. Because we spoke about last week how touching corals, they don't really like that very much, or we can cause quite a lot of damage to them. And unfortunately, we have to do that when we're outplanting, such as growing the corals on a concrete disc. We actually don't really have to touch the coral. Instead, we do somewhere else on the reef under a So that's another one of our methods, which we didn't quite make the video. Now, we do have, I've got one question coming from Emma. What the coral is to the, so that's a real question, Emma. Honestly, it's really that we're kind of just sticking in the bottom bit epoxy, so it's not really going to be any than like a centimetre or so, for example. So, and that's really just to secure it as best as we can, because if we don't put the nail and the, then that's not going to be very, and the coral's going around, especially when there's going to be waves, or for example a creature swims by it. And if the coral is moving around like this, then it's going to be causing quite a lot of damage to the side of the coral, which is going to cause it even more stress. So we need to make sure to keep it as nice and secure as possible. So that much, it depends on how big the outplant is, but it's well worth it to make sure that it's nice and secure on the reef and it's not having any more stress. Okay, so we have a question that's coming now from Cal, who's asking, do parrotfish also eat the frames and the concrete? That is a really lovely question, Cal. Thank you so much for sending that in. The parrotfish don't really eat the frames and the concrete. They do like, for example, picking the algae off of lots of different surfaces though. So if there is lots of algae that is on the frame, for example, or on, for example, pieces of concrete, then they may come along and start biting it, because they really do like eating that algae. But there's only certain types of fish, but we'll see lots of other different fish kind of swimming around in our coral and eating that algae as well. But what is really important to remember, Cal, is that we actually do still need to make sure we're cleaning those coral nursery frames, because algae is growing much faster than the fish can eat it. So we need to make sure we're still doing lots and lots of scrubbing on top of them to make sure that algae is not growing too much and unfortunately growing over the coral, which, as we've said before, can be really damaging for the coral actually. Oh, we've got a question that's come in now from Ron, who's asking, does the influx of lionfish in the Cayman Islands have... And yes, it most certainly does have an impact on reef health. So lionfish, for those of you that are tuning in from perhaps overseas and don't know how invasive they are here in the Caribbean, lionfish originally are from the Indo-Pacific region. So let's think about Australia, the Philippines, Malaysia, etc. They originally live all over there, up in the Caribbean area. The reason for that is the aquarium. They're really, really beautiful looking fish. But one of the downsides is that they eat absolutely things. So if you have a lionfish in your aquarium, you're not going to have a lot else in there very, very soon, because it will literally eat everything that it can. So these lionfish are now actually in the Caribbean region, and we have quite a lot of lionfish around the Cayman Islands as well. And they have an impact on coral reef health because they eat everything. So the smaller lionfish, juvenile ones, they tend to eat a lot of invertebrates. They'll eat lots of shrimp and crabs and stuff like that. And the older lionfish eat lots of fish. And lionfish are amazing because what they can do is they continuously eat and eat and eat and eat and eat. They never really seem to get full. They can also eat fish which is half of their body length in one mouthful. They just suck them all in. They don't even chew. So they're like a hoover. Yeah, they just suck it all in and then you just eat. So they are having a significant impact because they're eating lots and lots of different types of fish and invertebrates on the reef. And if we think back to our food chains that we would about, that actually disrupts the food chain because you're moving creatures, your ecosystem become a little bit crazy and functional and to be as healthy. Excellent question, Ron. Yes, lions are having a really bad impact on coral reef health. So thank you very much for saying. We've got a question that's coming now asking, is in coral resistance to bleaching and disease dependent on death? That is a really interesting question, and differently is, especially to bleaching in shallower waters. So, for example, we used to have a shallow coral nursery. So, with a deep one, coral nursery, which, as I've said, is just right behind. It's in around 6 feet, 18 meters of water or so. And we did another shallow coral nursery, which was in 10 feet of water, 3 meters, which was just further up the island this way. What we found with our corals that were growing in that shallower environment is because they were constantly exposed to hotter temperatures, because water obviously gets much hotter, which obviously caused a little bit for some of the corals that we had there. But that survived, we actually found were way more resistant to bleaching than have never been bleached before. Corals in a stressful continue means that they actually might be more resistant to bleaching in the end. So that was part of the studies that we were doing in the past. So very, very interesting stuff. In terms of disease, as I kind of spoke about before, we don't really know that much about coral disease. Our studies, if you actually mix the corals, so we spoke about genotypes on the frames, so different kind of types of corals on the frames last week. If you mix those genotypes, then it means that they are more resilient to disease. And if you instead have just one genotype on one frame, it means that it's more susceptible to all get disease. But that doesn't really seem to depend on water depth. It seems to rely on the genetic diversity that the corals will have instead. All right, guys, make sure that you keep sending in your questions and let me know if you have any more that are kind of coming in. But I don't think we actually have that many at the moment. If anyone's got any light questions, then please do send them in right away and I will try to answer them as best as we can. But if not, I just wanted to say a huge, huge thank you for joining us today. I'm sorry that we've had some technical difficulties. As I said, the perks of living on a tiny island in the middle of nowhere. But, you know, never mind. We have made it work. We've had some really, really great questions that have been coming in. So thank you so much for sending those in. Don't forget, everyone watching, that we do have the activity sheet, which is associated with this broadcast. The link for that is, so if you do want under some of these active home, or you can think of anything these activities, let us know, and then you can send in your completed coral frames, for example, which I'm sure would look significantly better than what mine does right now. But I do just want to say a massive thank you, as I said, broadcasts for and everyone. Bye.